We're going to review some Miranda. We're going to talk about detentions again, kind of weave that into some scenarios so we can show some practical application. But in order to do that, let me spin you a yarn here. I think last time we talked about robbery in any one of my classes, the sheets got robbed, so we'll use that same scenario. Somebody give me an example of a robbery at Sheets. What fact pattern do we need for a robbery to occur?
At where?
Sheets. We need to define robbery. How do we define robbery? Taken. We need something taken. Yes.
By force.
By force.
Property of another.
Property of another. And depending on the jurisdiction, taken and moved away without the intent to permanently, or with the intent to permanently deprive. Those last two somewhat included, or not always necessary. The intent to permanently deprive is not always necessary, but the taking of the property of another through the use of force or fear, moved away possibly, as well as possibly with the intent to permanently deprive. Those 5 things. So if a robbery is going to occur at the Sheets, tell me a story. How does that happen?
You have the perpetrator walk into the store.
Somebody has to walk into the store, okay.
Maybe brandishing a weapon.
Brandishing the weapon, okay.
Approach the clerk.
Why is it important to brandish the weapon? Why did you throw that in there?
Because by force, yeah.
Yeah, so if somebody pulls a weapon on me, I'm going to be at the very least uncomfortable and at the very most in fear for my life, right? How does that change if somebody walks in, your perpetrator walks into the Sheets and says, without the weapon, it says, hey, can I get $100 from you? Versus pulling out brandishing that weapon and saying, give me $100. What is the difference?
There's no force of fear.
No force of fear.
The cashier could just say no.
Okay. Giving them a choice.
And what is the implication that if the cashier says no in the second scenario with the weapon?
With no weapon?
If with the weapon, what's the implication? That's going to get used, right? Okay. All right, so keep going. Actually, so far we have Ms. Scott says our perpetrator walks into the Sheets, brandishes a weapon. And I think that's as far as we as far as we got. I'm going to switch over to a new storyteller. So what else needs to happen for the property to occur? Take something. So in your scenario, how would they do it? We're at the Sheets, so what are they going to take? What's that? Okay, how do they get to the money? The money's in the cash register. There we go. Yeah, threaten the cash register, or cashier, I'm sorry. Threaten the cashier, and the cashier can open it for you. So if the cashier opens that cash register and then gives them the money, do we still have a crime? Because they're giving it to them, right?
Yeah, because it's by force.
Yeah, they're compelled, they're scared. It's not like they, out of the goodness of their heart, said, hey, it looks like this guy with the weapon here is down on his luck. I'm gonna hook you up. Hold on. In between my shaking here, I'm gonna open up the cash register and hook you up with $100. No, they're scared, so they open the cash register and give it to them because they don't want to die. They're in fear for their life. And then what's the suspect do? They got the money. They're not going to sit and chat and talk about their day. Okay, they're out. So we have our suspect enters the Sheets, brandishes a weapon. And when you say brandish, what do you mean? What in plain English, what does that mean?
Pulling out a weapon, showing it, using, showing.
Right. Then they go to the cashier, ask for or demand. Because is it really asking at this point?
No.
You could be polite and still demand, right? In this scenario, it's the brandishing that stops it from being polite. You can use all the polite words you want, but it's not really asking. And then once they obtain the property, then they leave. Okay. So now that we've defined a robbery, let's put that into a practical application. If you want to take notes, you can take notes on the scenario, so we can refer back to it. It is 11 p.m. on Saturday night. 11 p.m. on Saturday night. The we'll call it Smithfield. Smithfield police get a radio call of a robbery that just occurred. That's the title of the radio call. Robbery just occurred at the Sheets. Suspect is a male Asian. I wrote it down here. Yeah, male Asian, 18 to 20 years old. Armed with a pistol, black shirt, green pants. The Sheets, you guys know where Martin Luther King Boulevard is? The Sheets is there, the intersection of College Drive and Martin Luther King. That's where our imaginary Sheets is. The police are coming to that. They're coming from all different directions because it's a big call, right? Some are coming from the other side of MLK. Some are coming from, what's the main drag here? On the other side of school?
Right.
Right.
No, what's on?
The 70 highway.
Yes. Yeah, business 70. So some are coming from business 70, some are coming from on the other side of Martin Luther King. They're all coming to this imaginary Sheets. The ones that are coming from the other side of Martin Luther King, they get to the Sheets and they're talking to the cashier. The officers that are coming from this side, from business 70, they see in front of the Smith building walking down the street. And see this guy. Let's start with you, Mr. Sullivan. First thoughts. If you put yourself in the shoes of the officer, what are your first thoughts? Why does he fit the description? What about him fits the description? Do we know that this guy is 18, 19, or 20 years old? I'll start. Okay, we don't know that. Okay. Specifically, do we know he's Asian?
We don't know, but
Okay.
we don't.
And what is our what is our clothing description again?
Green pants, what he has on, right?
Green pants and a black shirt. Okay. This gentleman is wearing a blue shirt and green shorts. Up close is up close is blue. I'll tell you, you're more than welcome to come to the screen. This is a blue shirt. This is a dark blue shirt and green shorts. Our clothing description is a black shirt and green pants, male Asian, 18 to 20 years old. That's armed with a gun. And you mentioned questioning him. All right. I'll come back to you then. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they should, because if those things match
Brandon. Same question. What are your thoughts?
I mean, you could ask him questions just because he somewhat meets, the criteria of it. It could have been, when it was called in from the Sheets, it could have been blue shirt and green shorts, because a person can get tunnel vision and, colors can look different.
Is it reasonable that our we said when we find robbery, we said they were in fear, force of fear, right?
Mhm.
Is it reasonable to assume that our eyewitness is going to be scared?
Mhm.
Is it reasonable for them to get, say, green pants instead of green shorts?
Yeah. Mhm.
All right. So everybody has so far said that we want to question this gentleman walking down the street. He's walking down the street in front of the Smith building, so a block away from where our crime occurred. So you said stop and question him. I'll come back to you, Christopher. And tell me more about that. Put that into more words for me.
Just like questioning where you was and that general time the crime being reported. Like, kind of general questions like that, like where was he at that time? Saw anything?
In the real world, it don't work like that.
Let's just,
But I would first have to Terry him because, I mean, who knows what he has on him? It's gonna be
Exactly.
because he fits the description.
Mhm. So now,
Ms. Scott, what,
now-
you started to say
now-
something too.
now I'm gonna, I'm not gonna question, I'm gonna search him. I'm not even gonna, question him first. I'm gonna, protect myself, make sure that he don't have no weapons or anything on.
So we have questioned him, and now we're transitioning to a Terry stop. This is our suspect. Do we know his name yet?
No.
When we say stop and question him, what if he doesn't want? Do you think he wants to be stopped and questioned?
No,
He's just trying to mind his own business, right?
but we have,
Walking down the street.
Yeah.
So when you stop and question him, what if he says no? What if what if the officer stops and tries to question him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm late. I'm actually on my way to church. Gotta go." Now what?
The officer has discretion.
What's that?
detain him.
You're gonna detain him?
Yeah.
Okay, what do we need to detain?
Reasonable suspicion. Reasonable
If we have probable cause, we arrest.
Right.
So what do we need to detain?
Reasonable suspicion.
Reasonable suspicion.
That
So
a crime
define that for me.
is, will, or is about to happen.
There we
Is,
go.
will, has happened, sorry.
So reasonable suspicion, we need a set of articulable facts that will lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been committed, is being committed, or is about to be committed, and the person to be detained is in some way associated with that crime. I hope that sounds familiar.
Mhm.
Literally word for word. I've probably said that a dozen times. So, in that definition, do we have a set of articulable facts that lead a reasonable person to believe? We talked about reasonable.
Yep.
Do we think it's reasonable when it said green pants and these are green shorts? And we said it was a black shirt in our radio call, but it's a blue shirt that he's wearing right now. Would a reasonable person believe that's the same guy?
Yeah.
Okay. What about, do we have a crime that has been committed, is being committed, or is about to be
Has
committed?
been committed.
What's our crime?
Robbery.
Robbery. So robbery has been committed, and a reasonable person will believe that this person is in some way associated with that crime.
Right.
So absolutely, you're 100% right, you're gonna detain him. The government can detain this individual because a reasonable person will believe they're in some way associated with that crime. Now, Mr. Soto Lopez talked about questioning, in fact, several of you talked about questioning. That's part of it, but exactly, Alexis talked about, Ms. Edgerton talked about doing a Terry. Tell me more about that. When you say doing a Terry, what does that
I
mean?
said
Well,
doing it,
first-
Terry. I said doing it, Terry, because you have to,
Oh.
because he fits the description reasonably. I'm gonna do a Terry stop and frisk him because, he had the, robbery consisted of having a weapon.
So it's gonna be an investigative stop, and we're going to, the government will, the officers involved can do a Terry frisk,
Mhm.
also known as what? What are some of the names we got there?
Stop and frisk.
Stop and frisk, pat down. And why are we doing that, Ms. Edgerton?
For our safety.
For the
And
safety
we
of
just
the
pat
officers,
down
exactly.
for weapons.
So what do we need in order to pat down this person right here? What does an officer need to pat down, to get a Terry frisk or a pat down? We already said a Terry stop, so we have the stop portion. Is this a legal stop?
Reasonable
Yes, it's
suspicion.
We have a legal stop.
Mhm.
So what else do we need?
Reasonable suspicion
Yep.
To believe what?
that he has a weapon on him.
What we call
That he
that
is armed or dangerous.
armed or dangerous. So is somebody who could have just robbed the sheets with a gun, is it reasonable to believe that they're armed or dangerous?
Yep.
Or both?
Oh,
Right. So see how we're fitting these in? We're getting round pegs into round holes here.
mhm.
Is this gentleman free to leave?
No.
Even if he says, I gotta go to church? Not free to leave. So we talked about asking the questions, where you been? So stop, pat him down. Where is this pat down taking place on our suspect's person? Where are the officers patting? Where are they searching?
Pockets, outer clothes.
Right,
Right. Not inside the pockets,
just out.
but the outer clothing.
Mhm.
And what are they looking for?
Weapons.
Weapons only.
Only weapons. If they find what they believe to be immediately recognizable narcotics, it can be recovered, they don't have to ignore it, but the sole purpose for the search is weapons, because they're going to ask some questions, and if the officer is going to ask questions of a robbery suspect who's supposed to be armed with a gun, they probably want to make sure he doesn't still have that gun on. That's the only reason for a pat down, Terry Frisk. Case law being Terry v. Ohio. At some point, some questions are going to be asked. What were some of those questions, Mr. Soto Lopez?
If you saw anything that occurred, or if you knows about what happened to the team.
How is Miranda going to apply to that scenario?
You still have them?
Absolutely being detained. So we tell you not free to go.
No.
Let's talk about the formula. You remember the formula that we use? What plus what equals Miranda?
Interrogation and custody.
What's that?
Custody.
Absolutely, you need interrogation.
And custody.
So custody plus interrogation equals Miranda. So we absolutely have interrogation, right?
Mhm.
Now we need to define custody. Is being detained
No.
No.
solely equal to custody? How do we turn a detention into custody?
We tell them that they're under arrest.
Tell them they're under arrest, custodial restraints, take them to jail, any of those things. But merely standing on the side of the road detained, or on a traffic stop detained, not necessarily. So, like you were saying, we could be a Miranda situation. This could be a Miranda necessitating instance, but how? We talked, I think the first person that mentioned stopping them was Christopher. What do you envision the officers doing when they see the suspect walking in front of the Smith building? Like literally, when you watch cops, when you watch TV, what do you see what do you expect them to do when you see them and stop this individual?
You expected to run up to tackle him or something? Or we can see it. But anyway.
Sorry, I don't know the week.
Essentially, you talk about tackling them.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you're talking about as far as what you're seeing on TV, yeah, they don't really wait to question. They usually apprehend their suspect.
And what I'm seeing is they're gonna Mirandaize them immediately,
Right.
automatically, so because they're
Right.
gonna take them in custody because
Yeah.
they fit he fits a
He's in the
description.
vicinity.
So what about, I think it was Mr. Thornton that talked about custodial restraints. Oftentimes we call those handcuffs.
Mhm.
Do you think they're gonna handcuff this guy before they ask him any questions?
Not unless they find like a gun or something on them.
I'll tell you in my experience. Urban environment policing. With the LAPD, absolutely. If I rolled up, many times I've rolled up on somebody who matches the description of a violent crime. I'm not going to get out of the car and put my hands in my pockets and just start asking them all kinds of questions. Where you been? How's your day? Are you late for church? No. This suspect this person is suspected of committing a violent crime while armed. For one, weapons are probably going to be drawn. Two, they're probably going to do some sort of a felony takedown where they have him lie on the ground and then handcuff him. Then pat him down, as you guys just described, and then start asking questions. Now, if those handcuffs are on, like you were saying, then absolutely, Miranda does apply. She's 100% right. Now this person's in custody, custodial restraints, plus interrogation equals Miranda. Now, if this person had been being followed, maybe there's some sort of surveillance team and he's a serial robbery suspect, and they knew there's a good chance that he was gonna hit the sheets tonight. And so the undercover surveillance team was following him around and watched him rob the sheets, and they called it out. And that same radio call was generated, but the officers don't need to ask him any questions because they watched him rob the sheets. In custody, no interrogation, no Miranda. No questions, no Miranda. Now, we'll go back to the regular scenario. The sheets has now been robbed. We had one cashier at the sheets. You know what? We'll make it easy. Two cashiers at the sheets. Two folks work at the sheets tonight. Only one was a cashier and one was doing the stock. But they both were there when the robbery occurred. When the person that called in, the cashier called in the green pants, black shirt. This person is detained in front of the Smith building. The sheets over here, a block away at Martin Luther King. What is the next step to this investigation? You started asking questions, and this guy says, I don't feel like answering anything. You said I had the right to remain silent? I'm gonna take that. That sounds great. I'll have one of those. Now what? No weapon. You pat him down, no gun. What else? What can we do? We want to know what's our one primary question we have? Do we have the right guy? Well, bingo. That is the entire investigation right now. Do we have the right guy? All we know right now is that we have somebody who vaguely fits, not that vague. It's a pretty good match. This is a better match than the officers get a ton of times on the field. I tried to make this as easy as possible for you, but green pants alone. What if this guy was wearing a red t-shirt and green shorts? Could somebody who ran from robbery take off their black shirt and have a red shirt underneath? Things like that, like a reasonable person.
Right.
So I tried to make it easy here. So we have a really good description, but we don't know. We weren't there when the robbery went down. Who was? Okay. Cashier and the stock person. He's over here at the Smith building. Over there on MLK is the sheets. The officers that went to the robbery, they're talking to the cashier and the stock person, and the other officers have this person detained. What are we gonna do? How do we find out if this is the right guy? Only two people in this whole world, 3 people in this whole world know if that's the right guy. And he's one of them. He's not talking.
Take the suspect to location. Get a positive ID.
So we want to get a positive ID. If we take the suspect to the location, that turns our detention into something. If you move a suspect, brings him into custody, now he's under arrest. If you're taking a suspect from where they were to where they don't want to be, which can be lawful, you've now turned this detention into arrest. What's another option?
Just add in, take a picture and send the.
You could take it. That's an absolute option. We could also bring the employees to him voluntarily, without anything he does is not gonna be voluntary. We just pull guns, the officers just pull guns on him and handcuff him. Nothing's voluntary anymore. The cashier can be asked, hey, do you want, we have somebody in custody. It might be the right guy, but we're not sure. Only you know. You and your partner. Now, we're going to call that a show up. That is the term we're going to use that you may see again. A show up. Sometimes called a field show up. Let's talk about the fairness of that. When the cashier comes in the police car and looks at this guy on the side of the road, there's only one guy there. When it comes to fairness, do you think the cashier is going to be a little biased towards making an identification here?
Yeah, they're gonna still have that fear in them. You know, you're gonna confront this, you're gonna have me confront this person face to face. They got this gun, you know, and I know they had this gun already on me. You know, I'm still afraid.
So we can mitigate some of those. One, by doing it at a distance. We said it was at night. I think I thought it was, I don't know if I gave you time. I thought it was at 2 in the morning. I said it was at night. how can the officers mitigate that fear at night? They're gonna drive up, maybe, does our cashier need to even get out of the police car?
No.
Can we shine lights on the suspect in the eyes so they can't see who's in that car? Things like that? Tinted windows, yeah, all those can mitigate some of that fear. When it comes to only seeing one person there,
That's not
is
fair.
that going to be fair?
No, it's not fair.
It's not perfect, it's not ideal for sure.
Mhm.
Why?
But a line
What is somebody gonna think when they see a person, when they see this guy in handcuffs on the side of the road?
that he did it automatically. Automatically, that's the one, that's him, you know? That's,
Otherwise, he wouldn't be in handcuffs on the side of the road, right?
mhm,
That is part of the challenge, for sure.
yeah. But in the lineup, you can't do a lineup of one person or,
Right, if we had more than, we're gonna touch on lineups, we had more than one person, we call it lineup. So do we have access to 5 other folks to put
No.
next to him? No, this is in the middle of the night in the field. This is the best option available. A field show. However, there's an admonition that needs to be given to the one making the identification that is essentially going to tell them, hey, there's somebody in custody. I'm not saying this is the person that did it. I don't know. Just, they might be in handcuffs, they might not be in handcuffs. They might be being detained, they might not be being detained. All I'm gonna tell you is that we're gonna go look at somebody and I need you to tell me if this is the person that robbed. And if it's not, then say that too. That's the type of admonition that's going to be given to the witnesses. So there's 2 folks in the sheets when it got robbed. Who's gonna do the identification? Why?
That person stalking may not have even seen them.
and that person was the one that was wrong.
Absolutely, I would say that's a good start. If the stalk person did see a suspect, there's nothing stopping the officers from going back and getting the stalk person too and bring it. Now you have 2 identifications. It makes the case that much better. But at the very least, yes, the cashier, the one who got a real good look. One person is going to be a show up. That person cannot be moved to the witnesses against their will lawfully without turning it into a detention, or without turning that detention into an arrest.
You gotta volunteer.
They could volunteer. So there are some exceptions to that movement rule. This person, if we're in front of the Smith building and that is a very unfriendly location to the police, and the police have him detained and they start throwing rocks at the police and a riot starts forming, do the police have to stay there and keep taking rocks because they're not allowed to move him?
Yeah.
For safety purposes, exigency, that person can be moved. What if our suspect shot the cashier and the cashier had to go to the hospital? Is that cashier going to get out of the hospital and go identify this guy on the side of the road? Another exigent circumstance, this person could be moved to the hospital for that viewing. Things like that. Somebody mentioned it, consent. You can ask this person, hey, do you mind if we take over the sheets? You swear up and down you didn't do this. It's gonna be 30 minutes before we can get the cashier over here because they've got to find somebody to fill in for them. They've got to close the sheets. Or if you're okay with it and you think you didn't do this, you say you didn't do this, I could drive you over there right now in like 5 minutes and we can clear this whole thing up. That's an option. So consent, danger, the injured victim, things like that. Now, far more often, when it comes to media, TV and movies, has anybody seen that scenario in a TV or a movie? I'll ask that question. I haven't. I've never seen a movie wherein somebody was detained and they brought the victim or witness to come identify a single person. I've never seen that in a movie. I've never seen it in a TV show. Outside maybe in Cops or something like that. However, we do have another scenario that we see in TV shows all the time. I think there's one every other episode of SVU. The lineups. When we say lineup, what do you guys, what do you see? What comes to mind?
5 or 6 people behind glass.
Yeah, a witness or a victim, victim/witness behind the glass, identifying a row of folks that look somewhat similar. That's a lineup. So, what are the advantages of a lineup versus the show? We said this. We already admitted this isn't the most fair, the most ideal situation. What is more ideal about lineup?
That is supposed to
It's
be
gonna protect the
composed,
witness.
right, and they're supposed to be composed of people that look similar.
So there's not a some sort of bias to where this only person out here must be the only person, the one who did it.
Right.
Right. We're not going to get into it today, but before I forget, make sure you pay close attention to the legal representation rules. If somebody is in a photo lineup before or after a custody. If somebody's in a lineup. So we have the ability to put folks in a line behind the glass and do that. That is logistically difficult though. Although you see it, like I said, about every other episode of SVU, you see it. I will tell you in my many years of investigative experience, I didn't do it once. Not one time in 2 decades. It can be done, it's legal, there is a process to do it. What do we need in order to do that? So, if this person, the only reason we did the lineup or the show up for this person because he got caught, right? He was a block away, he got caught. He tossed the gun, we said we pat him down, there's no gun, so the gun got thrown, something, whatever. That's common. But if he got away, he cut through past the pond, and the officers just never caught him that night. But then they go get the surveillance tapes of the robbery. And they're like, oh, Tommy. I know Tommy. Guess who did the robbery? Okay. Is Tommy in custody at that moment?
No.
He got away, right? Can we do a lineup? Can we put five people with Tommy in that lineup at that moment?
In photos, you can use photos.
In photos. But can we do the in-person lineup?
No.
Why? Because it's not there. We don't have him to put him in the lineup. Exactly. That which brings us to the photos. That's why the photo lineup is used far more frequently than the actual lineup. So a photo lineup is a lineup, except it gets done using photographs. Usually 6. The slang term for that is a 6-pack. Couple different ways. So we have a piece of paper. And you're just going to have 6 photos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Now, the description.
Now, when the officers give this photo line, so they look at the video and they recognize Tommy from the video. They pull up Tommy's rap sheet, his driver's license photo, his last booking photos, and they realize, okay, now we got a photo. I'm almost positive that's Tommy in that video. But I wasn't there. That's what the officers are telling themselves. So the officers are going to pull the photo, either a booking photo or a driver's license photo of Tommy. And they're going to put him in one of those 6. And then they're going to pull 5 other people who look somewhat similar to Tommy. Why do they have to be similar?
Because if you got 5 black guys and just Tommy fits the description automatically.
He's the only Asian guy there. The chances of him getting selected by our witnesses are pretty high, regardless of it. Because the officers are looking at a video. They're not 100% sure that's Tommy. They're saying, it looks like him in this video. I know Tommy and I know this guy in the video. I'm pretty sure that's Tommy. I know him.
And it's something with the eyewitness that is not accurate, right?
There are times, we'll get into the accuracy of, yes, the eyewitness accounts are not 100% accurate. In fact, if you look at the cases that have been overturned by organizations like the Innocence Project, anytime DNA has overturned a a conviction, 70% of those convictions were based on some part in eyewitness accounts.
Mhm.
70% of those eyewitness accounts were wrong.
Can we do that in this class? You show us something on there and then, you ask us what was the person wearing or?
I don't think I've done that.
Oh,
We did watch a video recently where the law instructor was talking about a shooting or a homicide that occurred, and they said how many people were shot. And he had never mentioned a shooting. That was, I think it was in this class, we never talked to the police, was the name of that video. So I hope you guys had a chance to watch that video. So they're gonna put together a lineup, and who are they gonna show the six-pack to?
to the clerk.
Yeah, to the cashier, to the stock person, and they're gonna identify. Same admonition should apply, or similar admonition should apply. Hey, I wanna show you some photographs. Just because I show you some photographs does not mean the person that did it is in this lineup. Because the officers, the investigators don't know. Investigators think that Tommy is their suspect, so they're gonna pull Tommy's information. They could be wrong. I've been wrong. I've been almost certain of a burglary suspect that we were following around, of who he was. We were following and following and following, but we didn't know a name. We knew a lot about this person. We thought we knew who they were. We had a name. Turns out it was two different people. The person we were following and the name we had were two different people. And we were following undercover, so because it's not like we just stop and ask what his name was. It happens. Investigations lead one direction and you realize that you're wrong. That's not malfeasance. That's not misconduct. It's just you don't make arrests until you have all the evidence. So in this case, Tommy isn't going to be arrested necessarily. The investigator's going to show the six-pack to our cashier and to our stock person, to our two witnesses of the crime, and tell them, hey, the person that robbed you may or may not be in this photograph. Just because I show you a photograph of somebody doesn't mean it's them. Similar to the admonition of them being on the side of the road. And they're going to select, hey, number two, I think number two is the person. At that point, that information can be gathered, compiled together as evidence and presented to the prosecuting agency, the district attorney's office, city attorney's office, for filing consideration. Now that the officers recognize the video, person in the video, the witnesses to the case have now positively identified a photograph of, out of 6, a fair lineup, then that can be presented. If the district attorney, now the district attorney has a couple different options as far as filing this case. They can say, absolutely, let's file this case and go issue a warrant and go arrest Tommy. Or they can say, let's present this case to the grand jury. We have all this evidence, let's present it to a grand jury and see what they think. If the grand jury agrees, yeah, there's enough evidence that we need to go to trial, they will do it. Those are the two ways that the initiation of the criminal justice system can be accomplished. One, the grand jury decides whether or not this person should be taken into custody and go to trial, or issue a warrant, go pick up Tommy, and then have an arraignment, and we're gonna have a preliminary hearing. It's either a preliminary hearing or a grand jury. If the grand jury is used, and they say, yes, there is enough evidence to go to trial, then there won't be a preliminary hearing. It's gonna go straight to jury trial. The vast majority of these cases are not going to a grand jury. It's just a lot of steps to compile somebody when they could go to a preliminary hearing that's going to last 30 minutes. The trial for this case is going to last a long time if it goes to a trial. There's a lot of moving parts. You've got multiple witnesses, evidence, electronic evidence, lineups, investigators, just a ton of stuff.
What is the reason that they would go to the grand jury if they had an abundance of evidence?
If they want to, there's a couple different options. If they're not sure, like there's not quite enough, they're not sure how strong the case is, they want to see what the grand jury would say. It could be political. The decision to take somebody to trial, go put on the shoulders of the grand jury versus the prosecutor, things like that. but they both achieve the same function. Just one is a lot more labor intensive because essentially you got to put on a little bit of a trial in front of the grand jury. But if they come back with it, and the term they come back with it, if the grand jury comes back and says, yes, there's enough evidence to go to a trial, that's called indictment. I-N-D-I-C-T, M-E-N-T, indictment. So if they're indicted, then they're automatically arrested and go to trial. Or there could be a warrant issued, and they can be picked up on that warrant and then go to their arraignment, their preliminary hearing. The preliminary hearing is going to be the similar situation. Is there enough evidence to go to trial or not? If there is, then they will be what is called held to answer. And then they'll go to a jury trial. At any point, there can be negotiations for plea bargaining. So the idea of representation. We already said that you don't have to, you have the right to an attorney. And if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you at some point. We said if there's custodial restraints, then then Miranda applies. So, but they're not going to go and get you an attorney and ask you questions on the side of the road, right?
No, but I heard you say it last week, I believe that, you do have a right to put restraints on them for your safety, without Mirandizing.
You have the right to use restraints if you're going to do a Terry frisk. But when you combine custodial restraints with interrogation, custodial restraints
That's
equal custody. Now, if you have somebody in custodial restraints without any questions, we don't have that formula. Custody plus interrogation equals Miranda. The other side of a grand jury, if they come back and say, no, there's not enough evidence to go to trial, it's called no bill.
no bill.
However, the odds of, realistically, the odds of coming back with no bill versus an indictment.
BILL,
Yes.
no bill.
The odds of getting indicted in the grand jury are very, very, very high. Because logistically, the way a grand jury works is only one side of the story is told. The prosecutor comes and tells our grand jury, 30 folks or so, in a room, listening to one side of the story. So we've only heard, in this scenario, we've only heard one side of the story. I told you what the cashiers said, I told you what the cashiers saw, and told you the radio call. We didn't hear anything about what Tommy had to say. We didn't hear any of Tommy's defenses. We didn't hear that Tommy said, when you stopped me, I was actually coming the other direction. I was coming towards MLK, not away from MLK. We didn't hear any of that. We heard one side of the story. And I would venture to say that each of us believe that Tommy, or have the story that Tommy is guilty of this crime. Because we only heard one side. And that's how a grand jury works. A grand jury only hears the prosecutor's side, no defense. In fact, the suspect doesn't even need to know that they're under investigation for a grand jury to occur. They may only find out at the end when the warrant is issued, saying, oh, indicted, we'll arrest them. They had no idea they were even under investigation.